So it's maybe, I don't know how, if this is the most difficult question about it. We're not going to go into the basics of the halal and haram and things like that. It should be clear. But one of the really challenging questions philosophically is the idea of pronouns. If you are asked in a workplace setting, there's many of us who are being asked, for example, on your name tag, on your file in your company, on whatever it is, on your email signature. Some places it's even mandatory, in places of education or whatnot. You should include your pronouns. You should announce your pronouns, whatever they are, even if you as a man are going to say he, him. So I want to ask you, what is your opinion on being in a workplace setting, being asked what are your pronouns, how we should think about it, how we should navigate that?
Bismillah, wassalat wassalamu ala rasulillah. This issue of stating one's pronouns or putting a signature on your email that contains your pronouns, this is what they call virtue signaling, where a person, through a gesture, articulates their support of a certain political cause. I think we should reject this virtue signaling and instead really highlight virtue. Like, get away from virtue signaling and actually display real virtue. One of the great travesties of the American Muslim community is that we are trying to define ourselves in a religious environment that has really been defined by evangelical Christians. And one of the things that community has done a very poor job of is demonstrating the difference between conviction and bigotry. See, many people think that conviction and bigotry are synonymous. Like, if you have conviction, you are inherently bigoted. And one of the things that Muslims, I think, have to do is display conviction that is tempered by insaniyah, right? I've firm conviction in everything that comes from Allah and His Messenger, alayhi salatu wassalam. This does not mean that I'm unnecessarily disagreeable with my colleagues or my neighbors or my classmates. And places where I can display collegiality, bringing in donuts for the team or being a good team player, I should actually proactively do those things. So that when I tell my team, this is a step that I'm unwilling to take, this is something that contradicts my relationship with my Creator, that is mediated by my faith, that is mediated by the practice of my Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they understand that this is not bigotry, because I've already shown where I will be a team player. Where I'm interested in the welfare of the whole. Where I'm willing to make sacrifices. So respect the places I can't. So where I would, direct Muslims to go is, instead of engaging in this petty virtue signaling, try to be the best colleague you can be. Try to be the best coworker you can be. Try to be the most helpful neighbor you can be. So that when your neighbor or your colleague or your coworker learns, that's a step that I'm not taking, they cannot impugn your character. It's just about principle. I don't do that. There are other things that I proactively do, other things I initiate, bringing, donuts for the team on Fridays, or, bringing people gifts for Eid or so. There are things that I'm clearly invested in our entire staff. There are certain things, however, I don't do, and then be prepared for the consequences, when those consequences arise.
So what if I asked, I have a right to freedom of religion. You're asking me that, you're saying I have to go extra just to practice the same freedoms that everybody else has to.
Well, look, if you want to retain good standing among your colleagues, I had a friend who, mashallah, was very consistent in his refusal to shake hands with women. Just was something he did not do. But before he did that, he would explain, you know, I'm very committed to the team here. I have always worked well with everybody here. So this isn't personal. It's just, this is my faith. And this is not in any way a judgment of you, your morals. This is my faith. And when he transferred jobs, he would actually come in, and this was, subhanAllah, just amazing proactivity. He would have a list of women he worked with at the previous job site. And he would say to his new colleagues, you can call any of these women and ask them how I am as a colleague. If you want to cite me for some kind of sexism, some kind of misogyny, you can ask them how I've operated with the highest levels of respect, deference, consideration. I just, one, do not shake hands with women. Two, I do not have private meetings with women in enclosed spaces. That's my deen. But if you have any issue with that, just call them and talk to them. Now, did he have to do that? No. But he wanted to diffuse the tension before it even arose. And I think that's hikmah, right? And whoever's given hikmah is given a khayran kathira, right? Is given, you know, an immense good.
Jazakallah khair. So then would you say that...
Ask me 3 questions.
Would you say that a Muslim who chooses, let's say, that maybe they're in a workplace setting, let's say like a school, right? Sometimes the way that this is framed is that, you know, you have to do this to encourage everybody else so that they know it's a safe space, and you don't really have a choice to say, do you want to do this or do you not? Like if you don't do that, if you don't announce your pronouns, or if you do, or if you don't call somebody by the pronouns that they want, you risk getting yourself fired. Is there room for somebody to say, look, I'm going to engage in this because I need this job right now, or I need to have some sort of preservation of myself, but here are some additional actions, let's say, that you could take?
You know, in the tools that we've been given in usul al-fiqh, you know, my background is really in Sharia. There is a principle called umum al-balwa. You know, al-balwa ta'um. When some fitna, some evil has become so widespread that it's unavoidable. However, invoking a principle like umum al-balwa entails capitulation to evil. That's what it means. When somebody in Egypt is arguing with the sheikh that if I don't give a rashwa, if I don't give a bribe, I can't advance professionally. I have to give this bribe. He's arguing, is there a place in our Sharia that allows me to capitulate to this evil? Right? And even though, mashallah, we have an extensive usul al-fiqh that might find some makhraj, find some rukhsa for him, I would say that should be invoked as a last resort, right? Don't capitulate to evil unless you absolutely have to. Now, I'll say this and I'll close. One thing that just gets me, man, it's a little irksome to me. It bothers me a little bit. What is the purpose of all of this education? What is the purpose of all of this training? What is the purpose of gaining these viable skills if you don't have any options? Like sometimes people talk to me, I have to do this. I said, Habib, you have an MD. You don't have to do anything. If it was a bit of an inconvenience to leave that job and look for a new one, you'd be inconvenienced by that. But I'm sure you could find one. So it really comes, how much does your deen mean to you? It's not like, you know, this is I have to do this. Do you? No, really. I mean, if you're really in a situation where you have to, like, and this is why I feel like, and this could be my own, you know, bias, but people working in labor, there's a certain bias there. If somebody working in labor says, like, I have to do this, I'm much more inclined to say, okay, I mean, he's working in labor. You know, his job is much more dispensable. Can be taken away from him, given to someone else. But a professional, I have to do this. I'm probably going to regard the urgency with a grain of salt. But that's me personally.
Jazakallah khair. Round of applause. Sheikh Ammar, I want to ask you about, because so much of your conversation revolved around Palestine, I want to just get your advice on navigating this conversation right now in our professional environments. So there are people who, for example, are Palestinian in workplaces where they have, for example, companies that are issuing statements that are pro-Israel. They have people who are, making small talk about how, it's so sad what's happening to the Israelis and the Palestinians. What's your advice on how you can navigate these types of conversations that start from a place of belittlement at the very least, and in most cases even demonization of Palestine, where it's not really easy for you to let's say be proactive in explaining this is what we believe, this is why we believe it, and if you make any sort of move, you could potentially also risk your status, your position in the companies.
Alhamdulillah, sallallahu alaihi. We were just having a conversation. Me and some legends from Pittsburgh came up with me today, alhamdulillah, from the MSA at UPitt. And we were having this conversation that I was so happy that Sheikh Ubaidullah mentioned in his talk, which is the idea of making your friends before you need them. And it's something that's really, really, really important, that we as Muslims don't become isolationists and just always surrounded by Muslims and we have no presence with the broader society. Because there are days like these days where you're looking around and you're saying, who are our allies in this? Who can we mobilize beyond just the Muslims who are expected to support Palestine? And so I think, and I was having a conversation with one of my friends who is very ingrained this morning, who is very ingrained with non-Muslims. They're his clients. He works with them. They are very present in their city, and it's a small town in the Northeast. But he told me, he said, 2 weeks ago, we started talking to some of our business partners and our clients with regards to Palestine. And they're not Palestinian, they're Albanian, but they're part of the Ummah, right? Like all of us. And they said, in the past 2 weeks, it's been night and day. They went from being anti-Palestinian to now in just 2 weeks, they're like ready to go protest for Palestine. And that's just by having conversations. So I think we need to give Americans a lot more credit. A lot of them, it is just ignorance. They don't know. And taking the time to talk to people, being patient to endure, patient in your emotions, patient in taking them along the journey that they need to go on, showing them the videos, answering their questions, debunking their myths. And inshallah ta'ala, you will be able to, if not turn them into somebody who is pro-Palestinian, turning them into somebody who's a neutral party, and even that is a win as well. But we have to do that, and we have to have, I'm talking a lot about patience, but that's what Luqman told his son. He says, Ya bunayya, aqim as-salah, wa'mur bil-ma'ruf, wanha 'anil munkar, wasbir 'ala ma asabak. Command good, forbid evil, and then endure the hardships that come your way. And part of the hardships that will come your way is that pressure that might come to you from your employer. It might come. There may be pressure that comes to you from your college, as we saw with the students who signed that statement at Harvard, right? That's incredible pressure that comes to them. But you're command the good and forbid the evil, and then patiently endure, because it is going to come to you. That's the nature of evil, is that it is going to come and it is going to put pressure on you. That being said, if you can't stand the heat, then get out the kitchen. But it's very important that if you don't have the ability to speak the truth, then don't say falsehood. So there are levels for this. Basic level is that I don't speak falsehood. I avoid the conversation because of my frailty. May Allah forgive it. And then if I do have that strength and energy, then I do engage, but I engage with patience and more patience and more patience.
Do you feel like it's a lot to ask And the reason why I say that is because we were speaking briefly in the back about what is the prevailing emotion for many of us right now. It's rage, it's anger.
Is what a lot to ask? Patience or
Patience? And one of the famous quotes that gets tossed around is that it's not on the oppressed to explain their oppression to the oppressor. Yeah, what do you think of it?
I think you should. A person shouldn't say it's not upon me to, not explain it to you. I shouldn't have to explain it to you. No, I should. We're an ummah of da'wah. That's what we do. We explain things to people all the time. And I should take it with not only should I mean, there's a lot of love and empathy that has to come from the Muslim community. These are things that people feel. And so if I have been trained to believe that Muslims are monsters by Fox News or CNN or MSNBC or whatever it is that I've been consuming my entire life, and then I meet a Muslim and that Muslim is the complete opposite to that. This Muslim is patient. This Muslim is generous. This Muslim is kind. This Muslim is, again, and I think we also need to appreciate something about the United States. Like, Americans are very warm people. I don't know how they are in Michigan, to be honest, but generally they're very warm people. Like,
in Texas.
Yeah, and Texas is crazy. Southern hospitality, people say hi. I'm from New York, but even New York, Sheikh, compared to Europe, like America, we are privileged to be in the United States. You can have a conversation with a stranger here. You can talk to people and people will talk back to you. They don't avoid you. They don't belittle you like they do in Europe. Europe is rough. It's really hard for people in Europe. And so my point here is that you can have these conversations with people and you have to have that willingness to share. Guess what? Because if you're not willing to share and you don't want to explain your oppression to somebody who's the oppressor, then the Zionists are going to be explaining away to them. And then don't say that you don't like their explanation. Yeah. And then about the idea of being scared. At the end of the day, the Prophet ﷺ said there will come a time when people will feast on you like people feast on, they invite each other to a meal. Everybody come and eat the Muslims. And the Sahaba couldn't comprehend that. They said, Ya Rasulullah, is that because of how little we are? Like, that's the only thing that they could imagine, is that they're just that few in number. And he said, no, you're going to be a lot. You're going to be like the foam of the sea, but you're going to have this disease and it's called wahan. And they said, well, what's wahan? He said, the love of the dunya and the fear of death, these two things. And Ibn al-Qayyim has a very, very powerful statement. Shaykh Ubaidullah said we have to look in the mirror. Ibn al-Qayyim has a very powerful statement. He says that it is not reasonable to think that the rulers of the Muslims all just come from the sky, or it just happens that the worst of us rises to the top. He says more likely and more reasonable is that a representative from amongst us rises to the top. And so it's very easy for us to say, Muslim rulers, look at them. They're not willing to give up this and that to help our brothers and sisters in Gaza. Well, I'm afraid to lose my job. So why am I blasting this ruler for being afraid to lose his relationships and his dunya? If I'm afraid to lose my dunya, I'm in the same boat as them. They're in the same boat as me, rather. Right? So we have to change what's within ourselves as well. And Allah knows best.
Jazakallah khair, Sheikh.
So are those in authority above you?
Yeah. Can you say that again?
And the saying is, as you are, so are those placed in authority above you. The Syrian scholar, Sheikh Hawakibi, he said, istibdad, despotism, is like a sickness that has infected the entire ummah. He said, we see it in the way that men treat women, the way that women treat their children, the way that governors treat the governed, the way that employers treat their employees. It's a pathology, it's a sickness. But kind of broadening that, most of those social maladies, sicknesses, they're broad in that way. And people just identify one aspect of it. Oh, governors and the governed. No, look deeper. You'll see some of those things in yourself.
Barakallah feek. So we'll shift, inshallah, towards the question of alcohol. And this is a question that comes up, subhanAllah. I experienced something, subhanAllah, where somebody invited me, a non-Muslim, who I was trying to do da'wah with. You know, I met him in a neutral setting. Actually met him at a Thabat event. And, you know, he was like, yo, let's. So we, so, you know, say, hey, you know, we should hang out again. And so he gave me a place that we can hang out another time. And I go to meet him, and it turns out that this place has an open bar. And I'm like, oh wow, okay, this is a tricky scenario for me. Do I walk out immediately? Do I just look? I can't be here. Do I stay, etc. So I won't share what I did, but I want to ask the question because sometimes this happens in professional settings where you know, right, where you know I'm going to a bar. I know I'm going to go somewhere where alcohol is going to be consumed, and you have to navigate that. And in other situations, it hits you with a surprise. Mm-hmm. So you're in a field of medicine where a lot of networking is not going to happen at the hospital. You know, if you want to build those relationships and whatnot, you have to go to things out of hours. How do you navigate that? And what's your advice to Muslims who want to move up in their careers in fields where all of that stuff happens around alcohol?
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. SubhanAllah, I didn't know he's going to ask me that question, to be honest. I was wondering what question will come my way. Essentially, SubhanAllah, just a week ago, a medical student called me from California. The same question, you know, networking, alcohol, how do you navigate that in the professional setting? Essentially, you know, it comes down to principles, like Sheikh Abdullah mentioned earlier. If you're a man of principles, people respect you for that. Whether it's LGBTQ matter, whether it's alcohol, gender mixing, whatnot. So alcohol is one of those things that most people know as Muslims that we don't consume alcohol. I mean, it's in the 10 Commandments. They shouldn't be doing it either. But they know that we should not be consuming alcohol. Now, if you are in the hospital, you're always hugging women, giving them kisses, if you're always sweet talking with people, if you're never praying, if you're out there doing other drugs, and then when the time comes to go to a place of alcohol, you say, I'm a Muslim, you really were not standing for anything all throughout your career. And now all of a sudden you want to be a person who's not going to this place of networking or journal club. So we have to go to a journal club. We don't have to, but it's one of the things that we do in ortho. It's called a journal club. Essentially, you go to a restaurant and they talk about different articles and different subspecialties. And I sit in a corner where I know people are not going to be drinking. Alhamdulillah, my residency, we have some Muslims. Alhamdulillah, we're blessed with that. That's why I chose to go there. So I sit with my Muslim brothers and we don't drink any alcohol. So on the other side of the table, people that are drinking, it's food. It's not a bar, but you know, they have alcohol that they can serve. And usually people start drinking more towards the end. Once we're done with that business, we walk out. As simple as that. You know, you show up, you perform, no one's going to question you. If you came and you didn't prepare your article and you're saying, you know, I don't want to drink alcohol either, but you don't prepare, it doesn't, you're not representing your religion or your prophet the right way. Ihsan is something we have to display in whatever we do. And when you exhibit ihsan, you have some leverage, right? If you're good at your work, if you bring some value to your profession, to your career, if you make a request, they will hold that request. They absolutely will respect your request. But if you show up late to work, if you don't stand for values of the company, and all of a sudden you're making all these requests, they're gonna be like, man, your liability to begin with, get out of here, right? If someone is bringing, you know, exponential value to the IT firm or to the, you know, the hospital, and he declines to put a he or she or whatever in his pronoun, you think they're going to fire him over that one little thing? They know firing him, they're losing millions of dollars. They lose all the patients. So you have to bring that value. And once you bring that value, you have that leverage. So to answer your question absolutely not. You know, we know through the hadith, the most beloved places to Allah are the masajid, and the worst places are the marketplaces. But let alone the places where it's known just to be of haram and alcohol. Marketplaces are known to have music. They can sell alcohol. Back in the days, that's how it used to be. There used to be dancing. There used to be all sorts of other activities happening. That's why that was included in the hadith. But when you know that those elements that made that be part of the hadith that is the focus of this place you're going to, what do you think that's going to be? So my way of looking at it is all throughout my medical school, undergrad, you know, I never networked in a bar. And I find it hard to believe that you networking with someone who's half drunk is going to give you some type of leverage in your career. I find it really hard. Like you going somewhere where someone is drinking, talking about all sorts of things. I find it hard that that's going to make your career. What's going to make your career is how you study at night. What's going to make your career? Man talaba al-ula sahira al-layali. Put in those hours. What's going to make your career is being honest, being diligent with your work. And absolutely, networking is important. And subhanallah, man taraka lillahi shay'an awadahu Allah khairan mimma taraka. Wallahi, ortho is a specialty, and I don't say it just because people know about it. It's one of the most difficult specialties to get into. I never started my medical school to get into ortho. Wallahi, I never even networked in med school. People would shadow, people would do all these things. Allah brings you opportunities to your feet. And that's exactly what it was. I never sought them. You know, I thought I'll be a cardiothoracic, I'll do cardiology, ENT. And then many times, you know, my people from our class would go networking. You know, they would go golfing, they would go networking, and they would invite me. And they knew I dressed like this, and they would invite me. And I thought that was kind of, you know, weird of them knowing that. But it's just a way for them to kind of get a pulse of you. I never went. And subhanAllah, half of them didn't even make it to residency. So it all comes down to what you stand for. And when you don't make it to those events and you know potentially there could be some benefit, Allah is the one. That's our aqidah. What is going to hit you will never miss you. And what was going to miss you will never hit you. So if that career motivation to go to an event like that, if that's what we're motivated to go to these events for, just remember that Allah Azza wa Jal is going to give us something better as long as we do it with that intention that we're abstaining from this haram to please Allah, and you're allowed to tell Allah in dua, oh Allah, I didn't go there for you. Oh Allah, you got my back. Oh Allah, you have my back. I upheld your obligations and what the Prophet taught me. Oh Allah, please help me in this situation. What did the people of the cave do when they were stuck? They told Allah, oh Allah, we did X, Y, and Z. Please help us get out of this situation. So we're allowed to do that. Obviously, we have to have some leverage to speak to Allah that way. And inshallah, the more and more we sacrifice the desires and stay away from haram, the more and more we can speak to Allah Azza wa Jalla that way. But وَإِذَا سَأَلَكَ عِبَادِي عَنِّي فَإِنِّي قَرِيبٌ. Shaykh Ammar Shukri mentioned, Allah is always there. Ask Him for help. He is the best mentor. He is the best advisor.
Barakallah feek.
وَمَنْ يَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ فَهُوَ حَسْبُهُ. And if I may add one more thing about the LGBTQ thing. I know it wasn't directed my way. I got saved from that question. But what's interesting is, in third year in school, med school, they assign you with partners for these patient encounters, like these practice clinical scenarios where you have a fake patient come in, and then they have some type of thing that they're hiding, that they're sick, and you have to figure it out, whatnot. So usually they pair students up. Our class, I have a friend sitting here. He knows exactly what I'm about to say. So we come, the third year starts, we get an assignment, on a paper of who our partners are going to be, who we're going to be joined with. 130 students. I'm visibly dressed like this on campus every day, right? Maybe not with the amama, it's a little too extreme. But I go to work like this. And when the idea of principles came, the N95 mask, everyone was being told, shave your beard, you can't, as COVID was at its peak. And I remember telling my dean when this whole lecture went on, I said, nowhere in that lecture was there any mention of religious exemption. I said, if you don't exempt me for shaving my beard, you can give my spot to someone else. I'm walking out right now. Wallahi, those were my words. I said, I don't need to be here. I'm not going to sacrifice this for this stupid mask that you want me to wear that we're not even sure if it's going to protect you. And later on, we found out it wasn't even working to begin with. So I said, no way. Oh, we apologize. We absolutely can have religious exemptions, whatnot. And then again, they know that because you ask for accommodations for Jum'ah. You ask for accommodations for Ramadan. They know you stand for your faith. So this was a funny story. So, and anyways, separate incident. We walk in, and then I get my name, and I get the name of the person that's with me. And she happens to be the only LGBTQ person in our class. And they put this guy with a kufi and a beard assigned with this person. I said, this could not be a coincidence. This absolutely could not be a coincidence. And subhanAllah, at first I was perplexed. I was like, man, that's a tough cookie, man. But she was an individual, was very sour. Like, she would actually ignore me for some odd reason. She wouldn't talk to me. She's just kind of like, I got those vibes from her. And I obviously was nice and courteous to her. SubhanAllah, I went home that night and I thought to myself, I said, everything happens by the will of Allah. There's a reason this happened. Maybe this is my opportunity to break those stereotypes with this person. We had a whole year together. At the end of it all, like you mentioned, be nice, bring in those Dunkin' Donuts or Tim Hortons. Tim Hortons is the way to go here, by the way, if you don't know. Bring in those donuts. And people love generosity. You want to win someone's heart? Be generous. People in the Western society are very stingy. For them to buy you a cup of coffee is like excessive. They can't do it. And when you go out of your way, it's like, oh my gosh, you bought me coffee. You're so kind. What do you mean? Wallah, I remember I was with an orthopedic hand surgeon and he was complaining about a $5 Starbucks coffee. I'm like, are you serious? Are you serious? And the bukhar, this is, remember, as-sakhiyu qaribun min Allah, qaribun min al-nas, qaribun min al-jannah, ba'idun min al-nar. And bakhil is the opposite. And I always say this in Thabat. But anyways, I would just, every single time I would have an opportunity, bring something for her, bring her some desi food and some Arab food and whatnot. Halal, all halal, don't worry. Dhabiha, not machine slaughtered. But anyways, maybe I offended some people. There was a mixture of both. Doesn't really matter, right? But anyways, we have to be very, open and flexible. So absolutely, I brought her some food, and then she, at the end of this entire, actually in the middle of it, she just opened up, and then she actually told me, like in person. I don't think I told any men student yet, but she told me, I really had all these misconceptions about you guys, and because we had a group of Muslims there, you guys hate us and this and that. I'm like, no, we don't hate you. You're, and obviously we know the whole situation, hate the sin, not the sinner. And I didn't have to talk to her about that, try to not navigate that way. But essentially, the whole reason of me saying this is you have multiple opportunities to win people's hearts by your akhlaq, right? Umar radiallahu anhu used to tell people, give da'wah bila qawlin. You can give da'wah without saying a word. Obviously, in situations like this, we do have to speak. We can't just stand there bila qawl because we really don't have amal, right? He said, bi'amalikum, bi'akhlaqikum, with your character. But sometimes we don't have the character to start with, so now we have to say extra. But when you have good character, you don't have to say too much. People will listen to you when you want to say something. So, I apologize for going over time, but I feel like we're okay. Barakallah feekum.
No, please don't apologize. Round of applause, please, for all the mashayikh. So if I were to summarize the idea of how do you navigate professional settings as a Muslim, I think it could be summarized actually with the point that you mentioned earlier on today in this evening. You mentioned that your career, if you have the right intention, if you have ihsan, no matter what you're doing, it could be something that is pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so I think it's very clear here. If our intention in all of these difficult situations is to strive to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and if we have ihsan, particularly before we are in the difficult situations, in our character with people, our interactions with them, taking every opportunity, having patience and whatnot, then inshallah ta'ala, whatever difficulty that we're put in professionally, it's not only going to be something that we'll be able to navigate, but it's something even that we could propel Islam further and offer service to others.
I want to add one last thing. I apologize. You mentioned career. This idea of being challenged at your workplace with all these different situations is our fault. When we were interviewing at that job, did we make dua to Allah? Oh Allah, allow me to go to a job or pick a career where I won't be faced with these situations? Or was my priority of how much money I'm going to make? Was my priority my bonus that I was going to get assigned for that job? Or was it, oh Allah, give me a job where it will be easy for me to practice my religion? Well, it will be easy for me to pray salah, where it will be easy and conducive for me to uphold my beliefs and principles. And I find that to be very powerful because we have those opportunities at every stage of our career, applying to college, picking the college to go to. And sometimes a brother asked me, should I go to Harvard or should I stay here? He had a scholarship to both. I said, where will it be better for your deen? Answer that question. And alhamdulillah, he ended up at the same place in terms of his career plateau where he would have ended up, Allahu A'lam, either way, right? So I think it starts before anything else. Before you even get that job, the dua, that istikhara that we make for everything, whether it's a career, whether it's a marriage, whatever it is, it has to be focused on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And you will find that will be powerful enough to, inshallah, allow you to navigate those situations when they do arise, because that was your priority to begin with. And that's my last thing I'm going to say. Barakallahu feek.
Jazakallah khair. Takbir. Any closing words, Shaykh Ammar, Shaykh Abdullah? Jazakallah khair. Wa iyyakum.
I think Sheikh Ammar was asking also. We should allow, if people want to, head out, barakallah feekum, we will not be offended. But I do think it's fair. You spent all these hours sitting here listening to us. We should give some time to listen to you as well. Not everyone has Instagram. Not everyone has Snapchat, all these, mashallah, beautiful social media platforms. So I think we should allow, if that's okay with you, allow the brothers and sisters equal opportunity to share their thoughts, have any questions.
So yeah, we'll take a few questions, inshallah. Bismillah. So the question is regarding the pronouns. So it's clear what to do when you have to share your own pronouns or not. You know what position you should strive to take. I feel like everybody already heard the question. They're just watching the. So what should you do if somebody else gives the pronouns?
One of the things that I find very remarkable is that Muslims very earnestly direct questions to this side of the panel, other than Sheikh Abdul Aziz. I can't speak for Sheikh Ammar. But when people ask me questions like this, I'm like, man, I haven't had a real job in my life. I'm thinking like, you do realize you're asking someone that my entire professional career, I have only worked with Muslims, right? So people asking me these questions, I'm like, Habibi, I've never had a real job in my life. Why do you think I would know? So I'm saying real in the sense that those challenges, I've never been forced to navigate them in a professional context. In a communal context and places of recreation like the gym and stuff like that. Different.
He or she at the gym, huh?
At the gym.
Hopefully they're all he's.
At the gym, right? But you probably can speak to how this is navigated in a professional context.
Oh man. It's not that deep. It really isn't that deep, to be honest with you. There are bigger things happening at work or in our deen that we can focus on. When we magnify it, it is deep. And Sheikh Ubaidullah makes it seem like it's the most philosophical thing that ever existed because he's that smart, mashallah, right? And he makes it, and he's right. What he said absolutely is correct. He opened this door of umum al-balwa, and there's another concept of usul al-fiqh called sadd al-dharaya, right? Where you want to close the doors for any fitna. That being said, practical answer, your question was if someone is asking you to call them by their pronouns. Is that what your question was? So does that pronoun align with their gender identity? No. And this is a situation where it doesn't align with it. Okay. So in that case, at the end of the day, first of all, if you're in that situation and you don't have any way out of it, that's the situation you're talking about, right? If you have a way out of it and you don't have to work with that person, you can find a way to avoid it. But if there's no way you can avoid it, you're stuck there, this is your job, and you signed up for this not knowing this, khalas, it comes down to ma fi qalbik. Okay? It comes down to what's istafti qalbik. It's what's in your heart. And that doesn't apply for everything. What's istafti qalbik, you pick up a candy at the store, it's haram and eat it. No. This situation it comes down to what you really believe in, right? When Ammar bin Yasir left and his father Yasir and Sumayya were martyred, and he, kind of said that exactly. So Allah knows what's in your heart. You're not a kafir by saying that I don't believe in Muhammad, because he had his intentions were clear, right? So if your intentions are clean and clear, and you're just doing it for the sake of making that person feel comfortable, and for the sake of not coming to a point where you seem awkward, you make our deen seem awkward, make people who look like you and I seem awkward, it's best, it's one word, you say it, you move on. I'm sure you're not doing dhikr of she or he all day at work. It's not like you're doing that, Allah, dhikr of it all the time. It happens, you see her, him, whatever, them, whenever you see them, it's okay to call them by their pronoun. And in your heart, you know that this is incorrect, but you're doing it for the sake of preserving the akhlaq of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? I have a hard, it's Allah Adam. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he was a very accommodating person, but at the same time, he made it clear our religion is also very inclusive. In these situations, it's not about halal and haram. It's more about what you stand for, correct? So what you stand for is only known to you, not even your husband, not even your child. These are things that you hold to yourself, and you don't always share them with everyone, right? There's so many things that we all stand for, we don't know about each other, right? And as long as you stand for that being incorrect, it's okay for you to call them by their pronouns. What really matters is, what is your aqidah? And that's what it comes down to.
Sheikh Ammar, you mentioned it in passing.
Yeah.
I didn't realize you heard that. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "Ittaqullaha mastata'tum." Fear Allah as much as you can, which indicates that there is levels of action that you're able to do. And I also think that if you can get away with it, you can just call them by their name all the time. It's another way to, if you can. I don't know what to tell you. I wasn't expecting that. You know, you guys are playing chess over there, mashallah. Yeah.
We'll take another question, inshallah. Yes.
And how to navigate the work of that. I want to share a little bit about my experience in
That's what you have.
Hello. Okay. So yeah, it was kind of like a challenge where they kind of said to me, "Oh, I speak Hebrew, what do you speak?" Or I visited Israel, where did you visit? So those conversations did come up. And this was way before obviously in Palestine it's been happening a genocide right now, and for 75 years there has been an illegal apartheid state. So in situations like that, they kind of want a reaction. What reaction or what do you do to navigate through that?
So they are pushing back on your position and they're saying, I visited Israel. Where have you visited? You tell them what? Oh, but they're talking in the context of Israel, right? I've been to Israel, so I know what I'm talking about. Oh, I'm sorry. Are they talking to you? Are you talking to them in the context of the Israeli-Palestine in general?
Look at like a microaggression.
Microaggression?
Yeah, like people who will mention Israel as a way to basically gauge you, like, what do you know, oh, I go to Israel, where do you go? You know, what do you think? People who will drop it in there to try to test with that.
Whose capital is Jerusalem?
Yeah.
Yeah, so then it's like the Sheikh mentioned, إِذَا خَاطَبَهُمُ الْجَاهِلُونَ قَالُوا سَلَامًا. I don't go for, you know, these types of debates. You know, I'm here for something more important than that. I'm not here to go tit for tat with anybody. That's when you know, there's there's a sequence to these verses. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, for example, in Surah Fussilat, Allah says, وَلَا تَسْتَوِي الْحَسَنَةُ وَلَا السَّيِّئَةُ ادْفَعْ بِالَّتِي هِيَ أَحْسَنُ. Allah says, good and evil are not the same. Repel with what is greater. فَإِذَا الَّذِي بَيْنَكَ وَبَيْنَهُ عَدَاوَةٌ كَأَنَّهُ وَلِيٌّ حَمِيمٌ. It's a beautiful verse. Allah talks about the transformation of a person who was an enemy yesterday into a loving protector. But how does that happen? It comes through a long process of you showing that enemy your kindness and your goodness. And then Allah says, وَمَا يُلَقَّاهَا إِلَّا الَّذِينَ صَبَرُوا. But the only people who can experience that transformation of people is people who endure. Human beings are not shayateen. You can eventually win them over. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَمَا يُلَقَّاهَا إِلَّا ذُو حَظٍّ عَظِيمٍ. And the only people who are allowed to, or are given the ability to experience that, are people of incredible fortune. And these verses, by the way, remind me of one particular person who is the GOAT. He's the champ, Muhammad Ali rahimahullah. Because that happened in his lifetime. He was hated. He was vilified. He was a traitor. He was a coward. He was all of those types of things. But then amazingly, if you follow his life, even when the belt was taken away from him unjustly and he wasn't allowed to compete for 3 years of his life, which is a lifetime when it comes to being an athlete, he continued to show people incredible kindness and beauty and charm. And he didn't harbor that hatred in his heart. He didn't. And it didn't show in his person. And then eventually, I love this part. When he goes back into the rumble in the jungle and he wins and he defeats George Foreman in the 8th round and he's falling and everybody is losing their mind in Zaire, the announcer goes, he's done it. The great man has done it.
I love that call.
He says, the great man has done it. When do they call a fighter a great man? But he himself is testifying that this guy is not just he's not a fighter. He's a great man. But to experience, and then obviously he became the most loved person in America. He lit the Olympic torch in 1996. You saw what happened at his funeral. And beautifully, at his funeral, the verse that was recited is وَلَا تَسْتَوِي الْحَسَنَةُ وَلَا السَّيِّئَةُ ادْفَعْ بِالَّتِي هِيَ أَحْسَنُ. He lived that transformation. And we can have those transformations as well. But we just have to do what he did and what Allah commands us to do. Yeah. Yeah, that was awesome. Great, man. Have you done it?
Yes.
I mean, I just answered the question.
You shifted the discussion in the direction.
Well, Sheikh, I'm not a political analyst to answer this question for you, but I can say that I don't think they've done enough, not at all. Unfortunately, Muslim countries have these armies, but our armies are pointed inwards. They're not pointed towards to protect the people of that country from external enemies, but they are mostly to protect the governments from the very people that are from those countries in the first place. And that's our unfortunate reality. But at the same time, I do think that there is no one particular topic that, alhamdulillah, unites the ummah like Palestine. And so if there's anything that can move Muslim rulers, inshallah ta'ala, it will be. But we just have to continue to have patience and push and to endure. And inshallah, very soon we'll see a tide change. I believe that, inshallah. Yes.
Bismillah. You know, there's an authentic hadith of the Prophet ﷺ in which he said, ثلاثة لا ينظر الله إليهم يوم القيامة. Three people that God will not look upon on Yawm al-Qiyamah. And of course, the nadhr of Allah Ta'ala in this hadith refers to his mercy. The first person, al-faqir al-mutakabbir, like an arrogant poor person. Then a shaykh zani, an elderly person that has an illicit romantic relationship. And then al-imam al-kadhib. Well, still, I'm using Oh, an elderly person that has an illicit sexual relationship. Is that better? Saraha, akramakum Allah. And he says that number three is a leader that lies. And when you look at that third category of a leader that tells lies, the reason that's so devastating is that when someone is in a position of leadership and they behave immorally, they destroy the legitimacy of their position as leader. And the people don't have any leadership. So when you look at a lot of the leaders of the Muslim world, they don't have any moral authority. And my contention is that if they start talking about oppression and alleviating human suffering, their own populaces will say, well, if we want to talk about oppression, we want to talk about suffering. Allahu Akbar. What was that?
A miracle.
It's getting late. Yeah, it's getting late. You know what I mean? The midnight crew just came. The midnight crew just came, right? But if we want to start talking about, integrity and oppression and alleviating suffering, I think a lot of the populations of majority Muslim countries will say, we don't have to go to Palestine. We don't have to start in Palestine. We can start right here. So I think a lot of those progressive, quote unquote, political voices, they must marginalize for the sake of their own security. And Allah knows best.
Jazakallah khair. We'll do one last question, inshallah. Rock, paper, scissors for it. You guys in the front. Rock, paper, scissors. One round.
Give it up for the sake of Allah.
Allah.
We both get to go. We both.
Go one more time.
Allah.
One more time.
Allah.
Okay, Bismillah.
Alaykum assalam.
You guys think we should the same topic with all the protests and stuff like that, move on to a larger agenda? Like, for example, we've had genocide in Burma with the Rohingyas, 1 million Muslims. We have basically the Muslim Holocaust in China, which is what Jews use as a blank statement. They use the blank statement as a blank check for all the immorality that they do. If we educate people that there are genocide within our time that has happened to Muslims in general, do you think it would be better to progress the issue and stop basically encroachment of the world on us?
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. The question is a very good question. Unfortunately, there could be multiple answers to that. My opinion, my advice that I would go based on the way I was taught by my teachers is absolutely, it's important to focus on those issues. But al-haqqu lil-aqrab fal-aqrab. Like the concern is right now in Palestine, and we are definitely, for example, these are haramain and sharia, and 3 haramain that we have, essentially, not haramain, right? Haramin. Essentially, you have Medina, Mecca, and you have Al-Qudus. I know, but we consider it a sacred place. It's not a haram in the sense that it's haram to do those things, but essentially it's a noble and sacred land, Mubarak land, الذي باركنا حوله. But my point is, we have to definitely protect what's happening now at this moment by raising our voices, like you said, protesting, whatever. And we spoke about different methods of, doing different things for the sake of Palestine. I didn't talk about it much. I don't have time to talk about it, but there's definitely different avenues to approach it. There's, again, has to be a balance between, like how we spoke earlier, between ibadah and also between sabr and basically resorting to ibadah as well. So yes, protesting all the time is not going to work either, and without any spiritual push towards it. To answer your question, let's focus on what's happening now. Let's solve this first. There's a lot more damage happening acutely. When something comes into the trauma bay in medicine, and there's someone who is sick upstairs in the SICU, even SICU, someone who is in bad condition, intubated. Your focus at that time is to try to save that person who comes in right now, right? That is your priority. That's called triaging in medicine. So right now we have to triage. We're not saying that those patients are not important. We're not saying Burma is not important. We're not saying Kashmir is not important. We're not saying Yemen is not important. We're not saying China is not important, and the likes of thereof. But what we're saying is we have to triage. And acutely right now, we do have to focus on what's happening in Palestine, what's happening in Gaza. And absolutely, if we build leverage from that, and inshallah we will, let's not, like you said earlier, some masajid go down and down every single day. Once we build that leverage, we have to use it for the other areas of the world that are also suffering, and not just be content with having one problem solved, because the ummah is suffering all around the world. Absolutely.
Sheikh Abdulaziz just reminded me of a point that I think is really important. And your question, to be honest, it also ties into what Sheikh Ubaidullah was talking about. And that is, if we're honest with ourselves, even with what's happening in Palestine right now, we're running on fumes and passion and iman, but we're not organized in any way, in any meaningful way. We don't have any consistent talking points in any meaningful way. We don't have any sort of structured campaign at a national level, state level, nothing. I'm getting random emails and messages from random organizations. We're just trying to throw enough stuff at the wall and cause enough dust, and that's it. So we're not really organized in a way where we can actually leverage this in the future to any other campaigns. And so what Sheikh Ubaidullah mentions about we have to become a community that actually is involved in a real way in our communities is very, very important. The reality is these problems are not solved in crisis. They're solved outside of the crisis. And so the problem is, since the last campaign in Gaza in 2021 and now, what were we doing as communities? We were doing nothing. And so that's on us. And we have to learn, inshallah ta'ala, when this bleak night is over and dawn comes, we have to not stop and continue to organize and continue, inshallah ta'ala, to actually do meaningful work and create meaningful relationships that we can leverage in the future. That being said, we also have to be very, very realistic, pragmatic. And the reality is, the Muslim community in America, I don't know if we're ever going to be able to solve all of the problems of the Ummah everywhere. But we should try to solve the problems that are in our vicinity. Sometimes it's disingenuous. I'm screaming for Palestine. I'm screaming for all these places that I really don't have. At the end of the day, I don't know if I can solve Gaza's problems. I don't know. But I can solve problems here in Detroit, for sure. My community can literally make meaningful changes in the places that we're in. And guess what? The Prophet ﷺ says that this ummah is one body. If one of it is sick, then the rest of it is sick. But the opposite meaning is also true, that when one part of it is healthy, that wellness benefits the rest of the ummah too. And so when the Muslim community in Detroit is healthy and strong, that benefits the ummah too. When the Muslim community in Houston is healthy and strong, in Chicago is healthy and strong, that benefits the ummah too. And so having that vision of working globally, thinking globally, is really, really important as well. And that actually is something that I can work on. That is something that I can do that's very, very meaningful. And then inshallah ta'ala, I hope that those relationships will also manifest into some benefit for the Muslims worldwide.